Okay, good afternoon. Having an opportunity to speak after such a person as Professor Sader, from whose books I was getting my feet wet as it comes to Russian contemporary history, is both a great honor, but also a difficult task and quite a challenge, especially for a foreigner. I will talk today a little bit about Russian cyberspace or Russian cyber operations, but within the context of active measures. And I will explain those definitions during my presentation. So in today's Washington Post, I'm not a big fan of this newspaper, however I usually read an article or two every day. I read a story that was written in the eve of the election of President Trump. And there was a very interesting opinion, very interesting analysis, because both the Republicans and Democrats are now thinking how it happened that Donald Trump was actually elected to president. And so there was a very short notion that Donna Brazil, who served as interim chair of Democratic National Committee during the elections, just published a book called Hacks, the inside story of break-ins and breakdowns that put Donald Trump in the White House. And so I thought that this title of the book is quite interesting because what people are doing right now are thinking, okay, so how it happened that Donald Trump came into power? How it happened that Russians had an opportunity to meddle into our elections or US elections? And it is strictly connected to what I will be presenting here, and it's strictly connected to how Russians right now and previously Soviets project their power and how they are using their tools of statecraft that are quite efficient, they are centralized, and they are implemented in a way that actually works. So I want to take you in a journey both to the history, a little bit of history of Soviet Union, and then we'll move on to the current issues of Russian Federation and especially the new branch, which is a cyber power. But to have a good understanding of what is going on, I just prepared an outline. So first, we have to go back a little bit in time. We have to jump into definitions to understand Soviet mind, to understand Soviet language, because if we will go into history, we have to be sure that we will understand what we are talking about. And with Soviet mind and what Professor Sader said before, we cannot mirror imaging. We have to understand how they operate. And one of the very important notions is their language is totally different. So when they speak and they talk about peace, it's a kind of a peace that Marxism, Leninism designed. So they talk about peace, which means for them the peace will appear when we will win the revolution. So it means war, actually. So when they talk about peace, it means war. When they talk about different things, the meanings are different. So when we speak about active measures, and we'll go into this later on in the presentation, we have to understand that the definition was changed a few times. And they were changing the definition also to deceive, because the deception, Russian deception, or the previously Soviet deception, started with the language and with understanding of the terms. So yes, we'll go back in time, then we will focus a little bit more on case studies from the past, and then we'll jump into current Russian information doctrine, their strategic objectives, and then I prepared a few case studies just to show you how they operate and how it is integrated into a broader strategic framework. And then at the end, I just wanted to present you two very short video clips from YouTube. If we'll have enough time, I will play both of them. If not, I will just play one. Okay, so let's start with active measures. And there is this Sun Tzu fragment from The Art of War And what he said was that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And this is quite accurate as we speak about the Russian strategy. And it's quite accurate when we speak about the Soviet strategy during the Cold War and even before the Cold War. Why? Because the way they operated was actually to realize their goals with as much efficient means as they, as much efficient use of the means they had. And so we have a basic intellectual problem when we jump into definitions and when we define them. Because first of all, active measures are means to achieve strategic political goals, both in internal and external politics. So the aim is to influence events in the way that, first of all, our target would think that this is his own idea. On the other hand, the aim is to change targeted country behavior, and as another part, it is also a way to influence him, influence the society, the foreign society, to act against its vital interests. So when we think about active measures, these are all different tools, a set of tools that can be defined in a certain way. However, the most important thing is the way they are implemented. And the way they are implemented depends on the context. So sometimes we can see that in the history somebody forged a document. But it is not about forging document or forging some signatures. It's only a tool to achieve strategic goal. So sometimes it could be used to discredit certain person. Sometimes it can be used in a broader propaganda effort. Sometimes it can be used just to disinform the international opinion. And we have to be aware of this context, because this is the most important feature as it comes to active measures, and today as it comes to cyber active measures, what I call it. Okay, so how they are implemented, how they are used. So first of all, as it comes to active measures, these are all the tools that can be overt or covert. So we can think about active measures as all the information efforts, all the publications, all the mass media effort and articles and let's say video footages, social media as well. But also these are the covert tools, like assassination, like forgery, like black propaganda, which is dissemination of information without giving a source of that information. Also, the term that should be explained well, so-called maskirovka. Maskirovka, which means a camouflage, but with strategic objectives, which means that we are not camouflaging, for example, only our move of our troops in military sense, but also we are camouflaging our strategic goals. And we are saying that, oh, we are not interested in doing certain effort, but in fact we are doing it, but we are putting a lot of effort to hide it. Or, for example, the use of front organizations. And front organization in the Soviet dictionary would be all those organizations that were set up not as a part of the Soviet state, but as an independent organizations. However, they were tasked by the people from Moscow. And the key aspect, as I said, is the context. So every time we will analyze active measures or cyber active measures, we have to understand about why they are doing this, why they are implementing or using these tools. And only from the broader context and only from assessing the vector of the attack, we can understand the broader perspective and the broader strategic goal. Okay, so just to describe active measures, or in Russian, активные мероприятия, what were the Soviet objectives during the Cold War? So first of all, the Soviet Union goals were aimed at influencing the West to believe that the US military political policies are the major cause of international war. And also they were trying to prove that the US is an aggressive, militaristic and imperialistic power. They were trying to disseminate information to undermine their immediate threat, which was NATO. They were trying to undermine the US military power, US leadership. Also some of the Western countries, not all of them, they were never targeting, for example, Western countries in which they had some assets, like the Communist Party, like in Italy. So it depends on who was in power, whether there was a broader strategic understanding of Russian strategic efforts, and if there was something like this in a foreign country, they would definitely move into using active measures against this country, against this specific people, and as Professor Sadar said, and Dr. Barekiewicz before, to cause chaos and to make people think that the current power is against them, and the current politicians are against the interests of the country. Okay, let's think about the evolution of active measures. And it started a long time ago. They actually were able to think about the active measures as early as in the 20s. And this is the heritage of what Ukraine was doing before. And when we are thinking about Russia and when we are thinking about other autocratic countries, we have to keep in mind that that the major and the most important threat and the most important issue in these countries is to protect the ruling elite from their own society, as it was stated before. So these are a kind of surveillance states. So how they use their own intelligence or counterintelligence? First of all, they have to penetrate and they have to understand how their own internal opposition works. As soon as they understand it and as soon as they gain control over it, they can focus more on the external issues. So the very first operation that involved active measures was the trust operation in 1920s. It was designed to target internal opposition, emigrant circles of white Russians, and also foreign governments and foreign intelligence services. So they used a lot of different tools, and they were realizing few different goals at one time. So it was a kind of orchestrated organization, and it's hardly achievable for the democratic countries to do a kind of operations like this, because to be able to implement it, you have to have centralized power, small circle of people who understand what's going on, and who have certain privileges and certain powers at the state level to do it. However, in autocratic countries like the Soviet Union, they were able to implement it successfully. So what was all about? So first of all, they started to send people, Russian citizens, abroad that were posing as anti-communist, and they were penetrating circles of white Russian emigration. They were talking to them, saying that they are a part of the broader anti-communist movement, and that the communists are not very well in ruling Russia, so they would like to overthrow them. In that way, they actually were very successful in penetrating those circles. Then what they did, they started to use different kind of active measures. So for example, they were luring people from the emigration into Russia and when people came, they were captured. They were also inviting foreign press, foreign writers to show them how Russia looks like under the communists. And of course it was a kind of Potemkin villages that they were creating. They will not reveal the truth of how Russia looks like. They would just prepare a special tour and show only what they wanted to show. So people were overwhelmed and they were very happy what they saw. They said, well, this looks like a heaven on earth. Everyone is happy. Everyone is feeling great. And it's great. So on the same time, there were different actions that were going on. And they even went so far that after closing up this operation, when they penetrate the circles, they sent all the information about this penetration to French, British, and other foreign services, showing this kind of operation. Why? Because they wanted to undermine those organizations forever. So when they revealed the truth about the penetration, nobody in the West wanted to cooperate with White Russians. So they achieved their goals in a way that I think, well, from my perspective, nobody ever done before. But this is only one example from the past, very old example. However, to be successful in implement those active measures, you have to have certain kind of organization. And the Soviets organize active measures both in the intelligence or counterintelligence and at the level of central committee in the party. So at the central committee level, they had some outlets that were responsible for organizing active measures. So for example, there was International Information Department, and it was responsible for messaging, for giving information to all Russian information agencies. So there would be one voice abroad, there would be one vision, or if there would be a kind of different visions, it would be in advance prepared to have this kind of misunderstanding between the information agencies, just to deceive at even greater level. Then there was International Department, and the International Department was responsible for tasking all the front organization, as I said, like World Peace Council, Democratic Association, World Confederation of Democratic Youth, or some other entities that were set up as kind of foundations, NGOs, international organizations, but they were tasked from Moscow. They were not part of the central committee. However, they were somehow linked. And the most important thing is that between those organizations, there was a KGB, or formerly NKVD or Cheka. And within this organization, they had a few different outlets. First of all, they had Department D, which was responsible for active measures, which was later on extended and the name changed into Cyberspace. And these were actually the most important work was done over there, because they not only had agents over there who were thinking about it, they had translators, they had people who were sociologists, they had people who they had technical cell to do forgeries, they had people who were responsible for messaging. So all bunch of different activities were under this service, and Service A was directly under the supervision of KGB General. Okay, let's go through some case studies. And these are also very old histories, so please don't blame me for pulling them out. It's just I wanted to show you that there is a kind of continuity between the past and present, and so I hope you will find it a kind of interesting to see how they operated in the past, how it interrelates to the present. So, for example, in the 50s, they were spreading rumors that the US is using biological weapons during the Korean War. And the way they disseminated this information is a classic case of how the active measures were used by the Soviets. So it was a black propaganda campaign. just to undermine the image of the United States as a champion of democracy and champion of the free world. They just wanted to show that they are not different than any other autocratic country. So what they did, they actually put up some information and they started to disseminate it. So they put information and they sent it to the World Peace Council, which was a front organization. Now at that time it was not considered broadly as a part of the Soviet Union. It was considered as one of the international organizations. It was 10 years after the IMF was set up, the World Bank was set up, the UN was set up. So on the wave of all those international organizations, people thought, oh, it is another entity. However, it was of course controlled by Moscow. So they sent information to the World Peace Council. The president of the organization, Mr. Frederick Joliot-Curie, picked up information. He said that there is a kind of information that he received, and he's very worried about it, that the US is using biological weapon. And then when he put this statement online, on air, after 1 week it was picked up by the Austrian branch of the World Peace Council, and Mr. Dr. Heinrich Brandenbeiner, after about 2 weeks, said, well, it is true and we have some evidence. So when the journalist started to ask what kind of evidence he has, he said, well, some of the US soldiers, the prisoners of war that were captured during one of the offensives, they said that they were from the unit that actually was involved in using biological weapons. They did not provide any names, they did not provide any functions, they did not provide any other information except this rumor that, oh, there are US soldiers that were involved and they are now prisoners of war, and they started to leak information. So after 2 or 3 additional weeks, another front organization called, just a second, what was its name? Federation of Democratic Youth, prepared a full report on this. And they published it, they put some information, not necessarily true, they were trying to play with this, and however, the media got interest, and they started to spread information abroad. The information started to circulate, and when you have this situation, it's very hard to stop it. Even if later on it was said that, well, all this information and all what was said was a kind of propaganda, we don't know the source, however, somebody does deceive us, the media are not willing to pick up and correct the story. And even if they correct, it is usually on the 7th or 10th page. So you cannot control this information, and the image is broken. You cannot repair it until you have a kind of active response and on-spot response, on-spot forces that will correct the information as it goes. Okay. Another case is about disinformation. So what is disinformation? It is a well-designed message containing true and false information leaked to an opponent to deceive him with purpose of changing the perception of targeted country elite, sometimes even to change the perception of the society. Let's go with the example. So, in the late 50s, Czech intelligence service, which was under supervision of KGB, set up, run an operation, and the operation was to portray West Germany as a still Nazi country. So what they did, they organized a non-existent organization, which was a kind of continuity between NSDAP and current organization. And they started to send letters to all the officials from France, Great Britain, and the US, who were responsible for supervising West Germany. And they were sending this information, they were sending letters, they were threatening them that they will be killed, and and they are still involved in this Nazi ideology. Even they sent a bomb to one of the director of the Lower Rhine department. He was French, and when the package arrived, his wife picked it up and the bomb exploded, killing her. So it was a kind of information to disinform on what's going on, what is the real meaning of the West Germany elite. And they were also quite successful, because later on the prosecutor came, he set up investigation, and after first few months he said, well, we are dealing with post-Nazis who are trying to get rid of the foreign powers from Germany. And then the information picked up, media covered it, and so the information was running. However, later on it appeared that the organization actually doesn't exist, and they do not have, there is nobody in this organization. It was a ghost organization. So only after Ladisław Wittmann, who worked on this case, he was a Czech intelligence officer, after he defected, he told all those stories, and the West could understand what was going on. The third case study involves agents of influence, the influence of operation. When we think about it, it's not about conspiracy theories. It's just true.
It's conspiracy practice.
Conspiracy practice, yes, yeah. So what the Soviets were doing, they were just paying people who were posed at the top of the political or elite structure, and they were paying them, or they were trying to find idiots who believed that communism is something good, and either they paid them or they were not paying them because they didn't want money. However, they were tasking them, and people and those people at the top were actually spreading and doing a very bad job for the Western democracies. And the two cases that were discovered later are the Pierre Charles Pape. I don't know how I should.
Like, there used to be a famous company doing chronicles before a movie in French, Pate.
Pate.
That's what I think.
So Pierre Charles Pape.
Mrs. Forrest.
Okay. He was a French journalist, and through his articles he was influencing French opinion, but also because he had more money than usual citizens. Some of the money came from Russia, of course. He had like quite of interesting life, and he was partying all the time. So he was inviting all the people to his huge house. He was drinking a lot, smoking, and he was not politically correct. So everybody loved him, and he had access to the elite. He had access to lawyers, to economists, to politicians, and he was influencing them by his opinions, by his articles. The other example is the famous Günther Guillaume. He was a personal advisor to German Chancellor Willy Brandt. And if you have a kind of person like Günther Guillaume, you can only imagine how many things you can do through such a person. Okay. Let's think about the current structure and current state of affairs in Russian Federation. So Russia now takes a lot from the past, and they are implementing a kind of strategic framework that was used during the Soviet times. So many things has changed, but not all. And as Dr. Horakiewicz said, the transformation is only a changing of a shape. However, when we scratch the surface, then we can see that everything from the ideology, doctrine, to organizational charts is resembling what was implemented by the Soviets during the Cold War. And so, what is the Russian approach to cyberspace and how it interrelates with the past? So first of all, cyberspace is treated by Russians as terra nullius, which is nobody's territory. So if this is an empty space, why not take it? Why not conquer it? And it is consistent with what Russia was doing for all ages, since Ivan the Terrible. They were conquering. If they saw that there is no enemy, or the enemy is inferior in power, in organization, they were just conquering. So this is a new territory to be conquered, and they are doing it right now because nobody protects it, because it's a vast space and you can do it. And the very important thing as it comes to cyber or internet is that the essence of it is information. So who controls information controls cyberspace. So the understanding of Russians is we need to control information to be able to control cyberspace. And we need to be able, in order to do so, we have to have both the content, which means what kind of information we put online, and we have to be able to control technical means, which means we need to control servers, we need to control networks as much as we can. If we can't, then we can hack it. If we can't, maybe we can buy it. So this is the approach they have, and it's very important to understand how it interrelates with the past. So while Russia lags behind technologically, cyberspace gives them an opportunity to catch up with adversaries like the US. And this is very important because what we see right now is they're organizing offensive troops in cyber. They do not prepare there is no strategic approach to create defensive forces. They are putting a lot of money into offense. Why? Because when you have offensive forces, the other side have to do a catch-up play. They have to catch up every time you attack them. And this is their strategic approach, to be on the offense in cyber, because everyone else will have to go after them. They have to respond. And if you are on defensive side, it is much worse position because you have to think about everything and you cannot predict what will happen in the future. So yeah, so that will be it. And as it comes to the structure, well, everything now is concentrated as it comes to cyber and information operations in the presidential office under Putin directly. And the presidential office, as we go with the structure, resembles the Politburo during the communist time. So the way they organize it, the way they implement structure, is a kind of replication of what was used in the past. So there is a top-down organizational structure with strategic control of messaging, information, active measures, etc. It's at the very top of the political structure, and we shouldn't be surprised that people from the top are actually involved in every aspect, even in the DNC hack here. What is next is that Russia seeks full sovereignty as it comes to cyberspace, because they understand that the internet was created here in the US. The idea is from here, and it was created as an open network that everyone can join and everyone can use. Well, from their perspective, they want to protect their own part. So that's why they came up with this idea of digital sovereignty, which means that they don't want any foreign companies in Russia that will provide internet service. They don't want any kind of foreign companies that will provide networks, that will provide fiber optics, that will provide software. They want to do it in-house. And if they do not have competences, then they will buy software, they will buy some kind of technology, and they will replicate it. And what was recently well known, the US decision to remove Kaspersky Lab software from the public offices here in the US. Well, it was a part of their strategy. They had a software that they wanted to implement here. However, every software had a kind of a backdoor through which they could extract information from the US, from any country that was using Kaspersky software abroad. And so, just to end up with this, it's very good if any of you have time to do it, to go through their doctrines, because at the doctrinal level, they put a lot of important information. And this information is is at the very essence understand what's going on and how they want to perceive cyberspace in the future, how they want to use cyberspace and active measures within the cyberspace in the future. So all those doctrines that came up from 2000 to the last doctrine was published at the end of 2016, they emphasize that first of all, the state interests are privileged. If there is a kind of state entity within cyberspace or information sphere, it is privileged. So we have to protect the interest of state entities here. What is more, they want to treat cyberspace as a strategic and autonomous domain, which means that they will use it in a way that interrelates with all other tools that they have. However, they can run separate operations within cyberspace as well. And they also perceive cyberspace as a sphere where they conduct and they have to protect Russia from psychological and influence operations. And this is quite important because when we review all the information about decisions of Roskomnadzor, which is the communication and media authority, they just imposed a new law that obligates all the foreign companies to store data on servers that are located in Russia. So it means that they understand that they cannot have influence as long as the servers and physical infrastructure is not set up or is not put inside their own country. And if it is established there, they can review it, they can go, they can use all their services and have access to what is stored over there. So, for example, LinkedIn and all the social media companies that wanted to run their services in Russia, they were asked to put all the information about the Russian citizens that are registered on social media accounts on servers that are located in Russia. Okay, so what are the objectives? Where the broader picture is very similar to what was in the past. However, some things change. So first of all, the strategic framework is that Russia feels a victim of what happened in 89, 90, 91, 92. They think they were tricked and they perceive this period as a failure. So they want to regain territories that they lost. They want to be in charge of what is the historical sphere of influence of both imperial Russia and Soviet Union. They want to undermine major opponents, and right now those two major opponents are NATO and the US, which did not change since the Cold War. They want to provide economic growth. However, the growth should be based on their own state companies, their own entities. They do not perceive foreign direct investment as something that they would like to see in the future. They want to invest in their own systems. They want to invest in their own financial organization, or even they are creating a financial standard for payment, which will make them independent from what Visa and MasterCard offers. And also in cyberspace, they are seeking superiority over other adversaries. And we can see it because they are so active in cyberspace, implementing the old tools, like old active measures with new technology, that it is so visible. If you go to Central Europe, if you go to Western countries, every day there is an information, almost every day there is an information that something's going on, and after 2 or 3 weeks it appears that it was the software, the virus, the hack was done by some entity from Russia. So what is the organization of cyberactive measures? Well, we do not have a clear picture. We only see what appears over the surface. We do not see what is beneath the surface. However, what we see now is that they are developing cyber capabilities within their intelligence and counterintelligence services. the FSB, SBR, GRU, they announced at the beginning of 2017 that they are creating cyber troops which will be responsible for both hacking and information warfare, which means that there is a kind of mix between the information war and cyber war. However, one of the analysts from Kremlin, pro-Kremlin analyst Panarin, he says that this is only a temporary establishment, and they will most likely in the future they will delineate cyber operations from information operations. We are not sure how it will develop. We'll see. We have to wait. And cyber troops are specifically charged with conducting offensive operations within the cybersphere or kyberprostranstwo. Excuse me. And this is the major force. However, the more developed capabilities are now developed under the FSB. So if you will see that someone was hacked and there was a APT28 group or Fancy Bears or something, it means that that group was under the FSB. And so structure also resembles the old top-down Politburo approach. So there is what Panarin indicates is that in the near future there will be, now all the operations are run at the top of the political establishment by the presidential office. However, in the future it will be State Council who will take responsibility for this, and there should be a kind of presidential advisors that will be a coordinator between all the intelligence agencies, all the secret services, and civil organizations like Roskomnadzor, troll farms, and organized crime that use hackers. And what they might come up in the future is a kind of separate media center, separate centralized media center that would task all different media entities like Russia Today or Sputnik News on how to conduct messaging. Okay, we are almost at the end. I just wanted to show you, this is not the current picture. However, Mark Galeotti came up with this organizational chart, which I think it's useful to understand how the active measures are organized and how they are tasked at the top of the leadership. And what is in the red frame here on the left are the active measures in cyberspace mostly. So there is a Security Council, FSB, SBR, GRU. They are cooperating with organized crime, intelligence, violent non-state actors, etc., etc. However, this chart does not have cyber troops within it, and that's why it should be updated in the future. Okay, we are almost at the end, and so let's go and think about what are the case studies from today. What can we observe looking at current state of affairs, and those examples are just from the media here in the US, so it's not a rocket science. You can read it every day. So what they are doing right now is, well, they are just repeating what they know how to do the best, and they are repeating the active measures in a cyber realm. And the cyber space is a force multiplier. So when you do an operation in cyberspace, you can, in the same moment, go with strategic messaging to the society. You can influence elite. You can undermine the image of the country, or you can build up your own image and do any other thing. You can publicly kill people, saying that they are incompetent, they are not doing their job well, etc., etc. So using cyber is just like adding a boost to an engine that works well. However, with this boost, they can just jump from going 100 miles per hour to 300 miles per hour. And what they are doing? Well, they are still using proxies. They used to use front organizations. Now they are using organized crime hacking groups. They are using hacktivists. They are paying them to hack other organizations. And if any analyst will come up and investigate, they will track the organized group. And the Kremlin can always say, well, these were not us. That was an organized crime group. We are fighting with them, but we are unable to fight them. They are so good. So on the other hand, they are using disinformation. Russia Today, Sputnik News, and with social media, the impact is such great that it's exceeding any kind of the previous establishment. They even formed in 2009, that was a funny story in one of the books that I read, the government funded a blogger school. So they were teaching bloggers how to blog. And those bloggers who were pro-Kremlin or very pro-Kremlin had access to Putin and his entourage, while the other journalists were disabled to have a media coverage. So this is the way they operate. And then you have so-called independent blogosphere, which is actually government run. Well, they also organize fake news campaigns, and they implement different tools at the same time, so they can hack website or media website, put some information on it, or for example, just compromise this website or the certain organization. And I will show you a short movie about it and how they hacked C-SPAN, the government television here in DC. It's remarkable. And they are doing hundreds of different other activities. And the number of these activities just surprised me when I tried to prepare for this presentation. I found something about 60 different stories that could be treated as a kind of cyber active measures used currently by the Russian state. And so at the end, I just want to show you this short video clip, and then we will be finishing, because at the end I just want to say, well, with this sad news that I provided, is there any light? Is there any way to deal with it? Well, there is, but first of all, let's see the video.